basically 3 strokes in watercolor. Only really 3 ways to put the paint on the paper using a paintbrush. There's all sorts of non-brush ways, but let me show you the 3 brush strokes in watercolor. The first, the most basic stroke, is called a flat wash. The idea behind a flat wash is to make an area of your paper smooth and even in tone to make it look like no paintbrush ever really hit there. In order to make this happen, you're going to want to mix up a significant amount of paint, enough to cover your full area with one brush load. Let's say you want this wonderful square shape and you want to eliminate every brush stroke. Essentially, if you carry that water through, picking up the puddle and not repeating your steps, you can make this all one even, really nice, solid tone without any brush strokes. Watercolor is one of the only mediums you can do that with very simply. If you have an extra puddle at the end, you can always pick it up at the end of the brush. But when this dries, it'll be absolutely flat. Now the second major stroke, and the most important one, is called the gradated wash, or a gradation. Making a gradation is a little bit different. You kind of have to load your brush up with the darkest version that you can get, and then you're going to water that paint down until it's clear paper again. Let me show you. Let's use the hardest color, probably your deep purple, which really explodes onto the paper with lots of pigment. May be the most difficult one to do a gradation with. What you want to do is put a stripe or 2 of the absolute purest pigment that you can get. That's it. I mean, you can almost not even see it's purple. It almost looks black, it's so thick. At that point, what I want to do is I want to dip my brush into my rinse water and let it just drip out a little bit. And then I'm going to add another stroke or 2 and let some of that original color bleed down a passage or 2. I'm going to dip my brush back in the water, squeeze just the tiniest bit out, and do the same thing. And with every pass, what I'm going to do is eliminate just a little bit of paint and add just a little bit of water, lessening the ratio of paint to water with every time I dip into there. And at the end, I'll just take clear water and then finish it on out until it gradates out into just the clean paper. Now, what the gradated wash does is this drives your viewer to your focal point. You'll see just about every award-winning painting you see in a show will have a major gradation in it that leads your eye into the focal point of the painting. This is a very powerful tool, so practice your gradations quite frequently. The biggest thing about gradations is if you try to go back and fix something that didn't work, as long as you balance the water in your brush, you can get away with doing the entire gradation over again while it's still wet. However, if your water has changed and it's not balanced so much, it's going to give you a really ugly watermark that you didn't want. So I can actually make this gradation a little bit better by going in a second time and just working it through one more time. So this gradation is just about perfect. Beautiful, smooth transition from dark to light. Let's get rid of that part. The third stroke in watercolor is called a wet and wet, and it's really the easiest one. Essentially, it is about laying clear water down or even colored water down and then dropping other colors into it and allowing them to mingle as they will. You can sort of control the wet and wet as long as you control the amount of water that's on your paper. You can draw into some wet and wet, or some will just explode and just do its own thing on the paper. But wet and wet is sort of the funnest part about watercolor. I really enjoy just watching what these colors do and how they interact with each other when they burst into a lot of water on the page. Watch the flow and see what that color does. Watercolor is the only medium that has, well, soul built in. It has a life of its own. It does something when it hits the paper without your intervention. It's going to keep on moving and doing things. No other art medium really does that. My favorite part about wet and wet is leaving some of that white paper showing, because when the color bleeds into that white paper, you really see what watercolor is all about. You see those feathery edges and the fuzzy stuff that you get. I just love watching the interactions. Sometimes you can sort of steer the action around and maybe drag one color into the next and help them combine themselves just a little bit. However, if you do too much of that, you can just turn it into a big muddy mess.